The 11th and early 12th century marked a golden age for the Kingdom of Norway. The Norwegians had only recently, within the last 100 years, abandoned the old Norse gods in favor of Christianity and formed themselves into a single nation. The Kingdom of Norway encompassed not just the modern nation of Norway, but also areas of Sweden, Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, and Greenland. The Norwegians had recently, under King Harald Hardrade, tried to reconquer England in 1066, but lost the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where King Harald Hardrade was killed by Saxon King Harald Gudvinson, who was killed 3 weeks later at the Battle of Hastings by William the Conqueror and his Norman invasion. Modern historians have often considered Harald's death at Stamford Bridge in 1066 as the end of the Viking Age. However, this had not marked the end of Norwegian power in Europe, as Harald Hardrade's great-grandson, King Sigurd Magnusson I, would demonstrate in his epic crusade across Europe. In 1100, the First Crusade had succeeded in recapturing the holy city of Jerusalem for Christendom and had established the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, this new kingdom on the far side of the Mediterranean was vulnerable, as the bulk of the First Crusade returned to Europe. Jerusalem was left with barely 300 knights and a small sliver of land amidst a sea of hostile Muslim states. Sigurd and his brothers decided to go on crusade to help the fledgling kingdom. However, only one of them could go. At first, there was a debate as to whether Sigurd or Øystein should lead the crusade. It was decided that Sigurd should go, as of the three brothers, he was the one with the most experience in war and travel. In 1107, the Norwegian Crusade was declared, and Sigurd became the first Christian king to embark on this holy mission. He was only 17 years old. In the autumn of 1107, Sigurd embarked on his great journey, with 60 ships and 5,000 men. The journey would last nearly 7 years, during which Sigurd and his men would fight both Christian and Muslims, and would earn Sigurd a fearsome reputation for his brutality and the fact that he did not lose a single battle during his voyage. First port of call was England, the kingdom his great-grandfather Harald Hardrade had failed to conquer, where Sigurd stayed for the winter at the court of King Henry I, grandson of William the Conqueror. In the spring of 1108, Sigurd and his crew set sail from England and headed towards Spain. Spain at this time was another popular destination for crusaders, as the Christian kingdoms of the north were seeking to drive out the Muslims and end the hundreds of years of Muslim rule. Sigurd landed in the kingdom of Galicia near the town of Santiago de Compostela, the famous pilgrimage city. There, Sigurd was allowed to spend the winter of 1108. However, the winter brought with it serious food shortages, and the local lord refused to sell his food to the Norwegian Crusaders. Sigurd remedied the situation by sacking the lord's castle and looting all the supplies that he needed. Freshly supplied from this escapade, Sigurd sailed down the Spanish coast, where they encountered a great pirate fleet of galleys, which were seeking peaceful trading ships to rob. Sigurd set his course straight for the pirates and stormed their ships. After a short time, all the pirates had been either slain or escaped, and Sigurd acquired 8 ships from them. King Sigurd would now assist the kingdom of Galicia in taking the castle of Sintra and the city of Lisbon in modern-day Portugal from the Muslims. First, they came to the castle of Sintra, or the castle of the Moors, in Muslim Al-Andalus, as you can see in this picture from present day. They took the castle and killed every man there, as they refused to be Christian. They then sailed to Lisbon, a half-Christian and a half-Muslim city, said to be on the dividing line between Christian and Muslim Iberia. There they won their third battle and acquired great treasures. The next place to be at the mercy of the Norwegian Crusaders was the town of Alcácer do Sal. But there would be no mercy. They sailed up the river and attacked the town. There they killed such a large number of people, the town was said to have been left completely empty. Here they looted many treasures. Now, after 4 victories over Muslims in Al-Andalus, King Sigurd and his Norwegian Crusaders continued their voyage towards the Holy Land. When sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar, they again encountered Muslim pirates, which they decimated in no time. They sailed further along the Saracen land into the Mediterranean Sea and arrived at the Balearic Islands. The Balearic Islands were at the time perceived by Christians to be nothing more than a pirate haven and a slaving center for Muslims. The first island they arrived at was Formentera, where they encountered a great number of blue men or black men and Saracens who had taken up their dwelling in a cave. King Sigurd landed on this island and went to the cave, but it lay in a precipice, and there was a high winding path to a stone wall that was blocking the entrance, and the precipice above projected over it. The heathens defended the stone wall, and were not afraid of the Northmen's arms, for they could throw stones and shoot down upon the Northmen under their feet. Neither did the Northmen, under such circumstances, dare to mount up. The heathens took their clothes and other valuable things, carried them out upon the wall, spread them out before the Northmen, shouted and defied them, and upbraided them as cowards. Then Sigurd fell upon this plan. He had 2 ship's boats, such as we call barks, drawn up the precipice right above the mouth of the cave, and had thick ropes fastened around the stem, stern, and hull of each. In these boats as many men went as could find room, and then the boats were lowered by the ropes down in front of the mouth of the cave, and the men in the boats shot with stones and missiles into the cave, and the heathens were thus driven from the stone wall. Then Sigurd with his troops climbed up the precipice to the foot of the stone wall, which they succeeded in breaking down, so that they could get into the cave. Now the heathens fled within the stone wall that was built across the cave, in which the king ordered large trees to be brought to the cave. They made a great pile in the mouth of it, and set fire to the wood. When the fire and smoke got the upper hand, some of the heathens lost their lives in it. Some tried to flee, some burned alive, the rest was killed by the Northmen. After this battle, the Norwegians acquired the greatest treasures they had ever acquired. This event might possibly be the most notable historic event in the small island's history. They then went on to successfully attack and sack Ibiza. The Norwegians seem to have avoided attacking the largest of the Balearic Islands, Majorca, most likely because it was, at the time, the most prosperous and well-fortified center of an independent Taifa kingdom. But before they were done with the Balearic Islands, they successfully attacked and sacked Minorca. Tales of the Norwegian Crusaders' success may have inspired the Catalan peace and conquest of the Balearics just 5 years later, in 1113 to 1115. Now King Sigurd and his Norwegian Crusaders sailed towards Sicily, and in late spring 1109 they arrived in Palermo, where they were welcomed by the ruling Norman Count Roger II, who was only 12 or 13 years old at the time. Sicily and Malta had only recently been liberated from the Muslims by Roger II's father, Roger I. Roger I, who had died only 8 years earlier, in 1101, had spent 30 years of his life, from 1061 to 1091, reconquering Sicily and Malta from the Muslims who had occupied them for nearly 300 years. King Sigurd remained in Sicily for a while, and was invited to many feasts and was well entertained by Count Roger II. In the summer of 1110, King Sigurd and his men sailed across the Greek Sea and down south to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, landing at the port of Acre. After 3 years of sailing and fighting Muslim heathens, they had finally reached the Holy Land. King Sigurd left his ships in Acre and rode on horseback to Jerusalem, or Jursala, as they said in Old Norse, where they were warmly welcomed by the ruling Crusader king Baldwin I. King Baldwin made a magnificent feast for King Sigurd and his people, and gave him many holy relics. Sigurd spent the following months visiting the holy sites in the kingdom. King Sigurd and King Baldwin rode together from Jerusalem to the river of Jordan and back again. King Baldwin and a larger force of Crusader knights rode with King Sigurd back to Acre, where his longboats were at anchor. In the year 1110, 10 years after the capture of Jerusalem in the First Crusade, there were still cities and castles inside the kingdom that had not yet been captured from the Muslims. Just a couple of months before King Sigurd arrived, King Baldwin had captured Beirut. Now King Baldwin asked King Sigurd to help Jerusalem capture the important city of Sidon that was still held by Muslims. Sigurd agreed. King Baldwin's army besieged the city by land with help from newly conquered Beirut, while King Sigurd's Norwegians besieged the city by sea and at the same time had to fight off the naval assistance from the Fatimid fleet at Tyre. The siege went on for weeks. Repelling the much larger Fatimid fleet with only 60 ships turned out to be difficult. But with the fortunate arrival of a Venetian fleet, the odds were more even and the city fell after 47 days. For his heroic efforts in helping capturing the city, King Baldwin and the Patriarch of Jerusalem gave King Sigurd a splinter of the True Cross to take back to Norway. With his mission in the Holy Land accomplished, King Sigurd began his home journey. Sigurd and his men sailed to Cyprus, where they stayed for a short while, before traveling to Greece and arriving at a Greek port in Gallipoli. They stayed here for a while, as Sigurd wanted to wait for a side wind, so the sails of his ships would blow up and look more impressive to the Byzantines. When they finally sailed into Constantinople, or Miklagard, as they said in Old Norse, which just means the great city, the sails of Sigurd's longboats were so close that they seemed to form one enormous sail. Emperor Alexis I had also heard of King Sigurd's expedition and ordered the city port of Constantinople to be opened. All the people of Constantinople came out to see King Sigurd sailing into the city, and the emperor came out to greet them. King Sigurd stayed in Constantinople for some time. The emperor held many feasts and games for the king. When time came to leave, King Sigurd decided that he would ride overland back to Norway. So he gave all his ships to Emperor Alexis, who in return gave Sigurd and his men many horses. Many of King Sigurd's men stayed behind to take up service with the Byzantines in the Varangian Guard. King Sigurd's journey home to Norway would take around 3 years, from the Byzantine Empire, through the Kingdom of Hungary, and into the Holy Roman Empire. In Bavaria, King Sigurd met with the Duke of Saxony, which would later become Emperor Lothar II of the Holy Roman Empire. He rode through the Holy Roman Empire and into Denmark, where he was greeted by King Nils, who gave him a ship so that he could sail home to Norway. After 7 years, King Sigurd returned home to his kingdom of Norway, with about 100 men left out of the 5,000 that started the journey. Many died in battle, some by disease, and many stayed behind in Constantinople to serve the Varangian Guard. King Sigurd was now given the epithet Sigurd the Crusader, or as we say in Norwegian, Sigurd Jorsalfarer. Now what can you say? That is one epic journey, a tour de force, a story for the ages. A Viking warrior and a Crusader spirit combined into one undefeatable force. How about that? As a Norwegian, I must say, he is the greatest king we ever had. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and I will create more. Thank you for listening.